and active in order for FTP to function. Banner sets a method that users will see when they log in. If blank, the FTP version will be displayed instead. File and directory permission are fairly self-explanatory. These set the permissions for who can read, write, and execute files over FTP. FXP enables File Exchange Protocol, but its use is not recommended as it makes servers more vulnerable to bounce attacks. Allow transfer resumption is a useful option that allows a client to resume a download at the last point known to the server. This can be very useful to users with unstable connections or trying to download large files. In the event that something goes wrong, the user won't have to start the download over from the beginning. Always chroot is a security option that restricts users to their home directory. This will keep users from being able to explore the complete file system. This option is always enabled for anonymous login. Require ident authentication is an option that will result in timeouts unless ident is running on the client. This is another security feature that allows the server to authenticate the user trying to connect using the ident protocol. Require reverse DNS for IP will result in timeouts if there isn't a DNS record for the client's hostname on the FreeNAS server. Masquerade address allows the client to enter a custom IP address or hostname if FTP clients are having difficulty getting through a NAT device. Minimum and maximum passive port are used by clients in passive mode. Values of 0 will allow FTP to use any port over 1023. The bandwidth options are fairly self-explanatory. These set the speed in kilobytes per second that users may connect to the FTP server with. Values of 0 signify unlimited. Enable SSL/TLS is the primary security setting for FTP, and we'll explore this more in depth once we have a basic FTP setup enabled. Auxiliary parameters accepts parameters for Pro FTPD that are not covered elsewhere on this screen. This is a fairly advanced option, and generally anything you would have need for in a common FTP implementation was offered in this options screen. First, let's configure FreeNAS for anonymous FTP, because it's one of the simplest ways to go about FTP implementation. Even without configuring any local users, FreeNAS still has a built-in FTP user account that needs to be configured in order for anonymous FTP to function. We need to open the permissions dialog for our volume under Storage, Volume, View All Volumes. As before, my volume is named Storage. In the permissions dialog, we change the owner group to FTP. I'm going to leave the owner user as root because for the purposes of my demonstration, I want to distinguish between users and root from a security perspective. If your volume has data on it, be careful with the Set Permissions Recursively option. It can overwrite your existing permissions and cause undesirable behavior. Now we'll go back to our Services tab and back into the FTP options. As I mentioned before, setting up for anonymous FTP is very simple. We need to check the Allow Anonymous Login box and enter the path of our desired volume. When we hit OK and then enable the FTP service, we should now be able to connect to the server over FTP using an FTP client or any modern browser. To save time, I'll connect here in Firefox, and we can see that I have accessed only the base directory and mount storage. Next, we're going to disable anonymous login and configure FTP for secured local user login. Depending on your preferences, you may either create a group for FTP or use the default FTP group. The default group has perfectly adequate control for my needs, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. Now I need a user. I'll create a user for myself and then assign him to the default FTP group. It's important to make sure that the user has a home directory or certain security aspects of FTP will fail. Since we already configured permissions for our volume, we shouldn't need to change anything to use FTP in local user login mode. After the volume is configured, we can return to our FTP service options and configure for local user login. Anonymous login must now be unchecked and allow local user login checked instead. It's worth making sure that always chroot is checked. This will keep the user from accessing any directory but their home directory. Returning to Firefox, we can see that I now have to log in when attempting to access my FreeNAS server's IP address over FTP. Once logged in, I'm left in my empty home directory. Now finally, we'll take a look at securing FTP. Now that we're configured to allow local user login, enabling FTPS is as easy as checking the Enable SSL/TLS box. After that, you're going to need a more specialized utility to connect, as most common web browsers only support vanilla FTP. FileZilla has a PBI for PCBSD and is more than adequate for this task. You should be able to log in and will remain confined to your home directory if you had always chroot selected. For more information on FreeNAS 8 and FTP, please visit the FreeNAS 8 documentation wiki at doc.freenas.org.